possibly October. And some of what I'm hearing in terms of the long-haul destinations, Europe, North America, etc., is perhaps not until next year, possibly as late as March 2021.
Wow.
Cruising, probably domestic, September. I was saying to Caroline before that we've seen some inquiries for the Kimberley as far as cruising goes, and possibly South Pacific around about October again.
Okay, so that's, and given that cruises have been devastated through this, do you think that they're going, like, how are they going to bring this back? How are you as a travel agent going to be able to get people on boats again?
It's going to be a lot to do with what they do in terms of safety on board and the measures they take on hygiene and social distancing, etc. The inquiries we're receiving, or we're seeing at the moment, are more to do with small ships and expedition type cruising.
Right.
We're not seeing those inquiries for the larger vessels. I suspect that there will be some pent-up demand for the small expedition cruising. But I think people will be perhaps more cautious with the large cruise vessels.
Okay. Yeah, it's going to be tough, I think. How about you, Carolyn? What's the timeline that you're seeing for your area?
Yeah, well, it's the $1 million question, isn't it? I guess it's interesting to see other countries announcing, reopening of their borders. The particularity of the islands of Tahiti and French Polynesia, it's isolation. We're in the middle of the South Pacific. So entirely dependent on flights and air access, reopening, and there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle, obviously. So I guess we're trying to be ready as quickly as possible. And in the meantime, for us, the timeline also implies, working on a lot of measures on the ground. So, for instance, our head office and the French Polynesian government have been working on a whole set of sanitary measures that will really follow the traveler throughout their journey. So from arrival at the airport to, check into your hotel, then, activities as well, just making sure this is absolutely entirely compliant and making sure, again, that we're putting the right measures in place. So this is super important for us working on the ground, at the minute, and making sure all of that is, we're working towards that as well, so that we can be ready for when the flights reopen. As Barry mentioned, some of the timeline have been discussed in regard to the Trans-Tasman bubble, which is, an exciting, outcome for all of us. We would love to see, as part of that bubble being extended to the South Pacific nations. That would be something as well, which, would make sense, especially, again, a lot of them haven't had many, or some of them not at all, COVID cases. So that could be a nice logical kind of step, to that bubble. But in saying that, obviously, again, the safety element is so important, not only for travelers, but also for local people on the islands, especially islands where, you don't have the same kind of medical infrastructure. So we need to ensure that we're very clear in terms of what that Trans-Tasman bubble looks like, and the potential extension into the Pacific Islands. No real timeline, from our perspective at the moment. There are a lot of discussions at government level, and obviously, with the different governments around the world, because it's a two-way conversation. It's not just about us saying, yes, we're reopening our borders. So, we should have more information actually within the next 2 weeks in regards to, what the measures, the re-entry measures would look like. Is it a quarantine? Is it a COVID test on arrival? Do you need to do another one a bit later? And then also on flights. So yeah, within 2 weeks' time, we should have a clearer kind of indication.
Wow. Are there any flights going into Tahiti at the moment?
So only repatriation flight and cargo. The islands of Tahiti, or French Polynesia, is a French overseas territory. So there is an obligation of what we called territorial continuity with France. So there are flights between France and the islands of Tahiti happening on a regular basis. But again, this is purely repatriation and cargo at this stage.
Right. And have the hotels there been repurposed as quarantine?
So some of them have, and there's also a specific center that people have to go to when they arrive. So that's at the moment that is the rule. All the people who come back to French Polynesia have to quarantine indeed for 2 weeks.
Okay. Thank you so much, Carolyn. And then Simon, I just pull you up out here. How about you? What do you see as the road back?
Okay, now very happy to share our experience with you. Maybe we can start with a place that is close to us in Sydney. So as some of you would know, that the New South Wales government came out last week and said that we could start regional tourism as from 1st of June. We have 3 properties in New South Wales, one in Sydney, one in outside Sydney. We have one in Hunter Valley, and we have one in Blue Mountains. And since the announcement, I'm pleased to tell everybody that we have been inundated with bookings. And over the last 3 days, we have taken a lot of business, I think in excess of $200,000 in a sense. In fact, over the Queen's birthday long weekend, I'm also pleased to tell you all that the 2 regional hotels are now full on that weekend. So to me, that is a big pent-up demand in the sense that people really want to get out. And after staying at home for 3 months and getting bored with their cooking and watching Netflix and so forth, they really want to get some fresh air, going out to see, the things that they might not have seen in the past and taking them for granted. So New South Wales is great. Queensland, we're obviously waiting for the Premier of Queensland to make up her mind whether she wants to open up to tourism in Queensland. And we have got 4 properties in Queensland. And winter, as most of you would know, is the peak time in Queensland. So we're anxiously waiting for the Premier to lift that restriction so we can do some business in Queensland. Victoria is doing okay. We've got a property in Melbourne. We also got a property in Tasmania, which is closed, in Launceston, that is not doing well. But walking you around the world, China, our hotels in China has started operation about 3 weeks ago. The occupancy has now gone over 30%, from 0% to 30% in the last few weeks. A lot of domestic tourism demand in the sense. It was reported the highway in China is actually busier than before. So again, similar pattern to what you see in New South Wales, that people are keen to get out of the city and get some fresh air and enjoy the sightseeing. In Japan, we have closed about 35 hotels. We're gradually opening the hotels. The first batch of hotel in Tokyo, Metropolitan, will open 1st of June. And then the resort hotel will probably open in the 15th of June. In Singapore, we never closed the hotel because we've been accommodating the COVID-19 people who can't leave Singapore, stranded in a lot of Malaysian folks who can't go back to Malaysia and Indonesia and so forth. So that hotel is actually running around 40–50% occupancy, different type of clientele, of course. And Singapore is relaxing by the end of June, so we would hope to see some intra-Asia travel in the sense. India, the hotel in India is all closed, won't open for business until, I would say, June in the sense the government extended the ban to the end of June. So with Middle East, I think Dubai is still getting over it, and so is Saudi Arabia, our hotels over there. I think it will take a while in a sense for Middle East to come back, probably June, July. Our hotels in UK probably is, I would say, the last. I think UK is still going through what we have gone through about 2 months ago. I would say that the restriction will probably go until mid-July. We are thinking about opening the hotel in August. So that's the walk around the world with you.
Wow. That was a very concise going around the planet. That's interesting. So India's shut down. Australia sounds like it could be getting back there. I can tell you here from Bangkok, things are kind of getting back to normal. It's all a little bit weird. Like you go to a restaurant here and 2 people aren't allowed to sit at the same table. And so these kinds of changes are having a psychological effect on travel decisions, whether it's just locally or to actually go what you're going to be able to do when you arrive there. So it brings me to the next question. People's wallets and minds will be in a very different place after this. how will you encourage them to travel again and get back to normal? Let me maybe Carolyn, could you take that?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, very interesting and important question, I guess, for all of us from a destination perspective. You know, this is really at the heart of what we have to do is inspire people, obviously taking into account, you know, the new reality, the new concerns as well. It's really encouraging to hear what Simon was just saying in regards to pent-up demand and people absolutely wanting to actually get out and do something else. And I think, you know, obviously there'll be probably new expectation, new needs. As you said, we've been, you know, enclosed in our homes, you know, for a number of months or weeks. And therefore, you know, the nature appeal seems to be one of the strongest kind of positioning, you know, that we are going to be embracing as the islands of Tahiti, and we're perfectly suited for this kind of travel. It's interesting to see all the market research out there at the moment, and I was reading some stats from Kantar TNS saying that brand, you know, continued to advertise during the GFC in 2008, recovered 9 times faster than others who actually just stopped entirely. And obviously, you know, it doesn't have to be done with massive budgets. We've got our own channel. We've got social now, which is a fantastic way to keep, you know, engaged with consumers, make sure, you know, again, we inspire them and we continue to bring relevant content to them. As far as Tahiti, the islands of Tahiti is concerned, we've actually, during the crisis, implemented a campaign called Sunnier Days Ahead, really trying to instill a bit of faith and hope, and again, keeping that link, you know, alive with consumers, but also trade partners alike. And it was all about really, again, you know, trying to instill a bit of positivity. And we brought Tahiti to their homes. So we had like a web series, for instance, where, you know, you could see Tahitian monoi being made, or a Tahitian dancing session, you know, being taught to you, you know, how about diving, you know, in the beautiful lagoon here. So you kind of followed specific characters and personalities around the islands, which was a fantastic way to kind of keep people, you know, dreaming about the destination. And the response has been really overwhelming. I guess we've seen, you know, in terms of social channel, the engagement has been up the roof because people had more time on their hands as well to kind of consume that. Many kind of PR driven campaign as well, which have given us a lot of exposure, which would probably have been harder in different times. I think a lot of media outlets were also hungry for content. Right now, we're obviously trying to adapt the message because, you know, things are changing. It's not about being enclosed into our home as much as possible. So we're working on a new campaign to really reflect what the expectations of, you know, travelers might look like. And that is, you know, as we mentioned, being close to nature, find a place where reconnect with yourself, with the world, you know, and again, trying to position Tahiti in that context for us is very important. So yeah, so watch that space, but yeah, we'll be coming up a new campaign, which will also focus on, you know, repurposing tourism, you know, and what it means for the islands of Tahiti, with a big focus on sustainability, which I think is, you know, at the back of everybody's mind as well.
Right. I like that. Sunnier days ahead. Very appropriate. It's good. How about yourself, Barry?
I was very pleased to hear what Simon said about his properties in the Blue Mountains and on the Hunter Valley, because we're going to be putting a lot of emphasis on creating good value holiday packages, initially within Australia. As I say, we have a network around Australia of 600 personal travel managers. So we'll be looking at packages into Sydney, from Sydney, etc., domestically. We're expecting to follow that with packages to New Zealand. And if the South Pacific bubble eventuates, we're hoping also to extend that to Fiji and elsewhere. And we'd be looking to promote those packages via press advertising, EDMs, digital, social media, etc.
Right.
And we'd be looking at both, say, resort holidays and city stays with, say, guided touring and self-touring itineraries.
Right.
As part of that, we'd be requesting suppliers, whether they be airlines, accommodation providers, car hire companies, sightseeing operators to provide fair conditions, shall we say, in these uncertain times, to assist agents to guarantee the ability to rebook at no additional cost or obtain a full refund in the event that there was a further COVID-19 travel restraints.
Right.
I guess what we'd learned from the current situation is that we'd be looking for the industry to provide greater clarity around terms and conditions. And I think we've probably learned a lot over the last few weeks. We'd also be hoping that travel insurance providers would better explain their policy coverage and their claim procedures going forward so that all claims are processed on an equal basis.
Right.
And I guess, again, we'd be looking at suppliers to finesse their products to demonstrate what measures they're taking to ensure client and staff safety, social distancing, group travel numbers, provision of hand sanitizers, deep cleaning of vehicles, guest rooms, restaurants, and probably a cessation of buffet meals, etc. I think that covers it pretty well.
Okay, thanks. And that's interesting about insurance. There are a couple of points there. Insurance, cancellations, I think they're big issues globally.
Yes.
We'll come back to some of the things you mentioned too, because there's one thing about, like, we're noticing here the awareness about, and people doing PR campaigns about what they're doing. I'm wondering, is that going to be such a norm that it's going to be something that people won't be pushing? It will just be expected.
I suspect it's going to be something that people are going to be asking about in the process of making bookings, given the media coverage that's occurred down here.
Right.
People will want greater understanding than possibly they've had up to now.
Okay. And Simon, what would you say?
I just want to pick up on a couple of points that Barry said is, so we have amended, like most hoteliers, our cancellation policy. We are implementing very flexible cancellation policy. So we want to give the customers who book with us with the peace of mind that they can cancel anytime, in the sense, and would have full refund, in the sense we won't force them to take any vouchers and so forth. If people book now and they can't travel, they will get the money back, in the sense. So I think we all in the travel industry need to be more flexible in our approach to the customers. We will be spending a lot more money in maintaining the hygiene and sanitation standard at all the hotels. I think the world will be different after this, and the customer's expectation at the hotel and the airline and so forth will be very different. So our goals, and our hotelier use the term of average length of stay. That is how many nights the customer will stay with us, so they can spend more money with us, in a sense. So if you look at a lot of our properties, especially in the city and so forth, our average length of stay is probably 1 or 2 nights, in a sense. So our goal is to be able to extend the number of nights they stay with us by offering more guest experience that they wouldn't have the time to experience before. I think we forecast the airfare will probably rise, at least for the first 6 months, after this, and people may not be able to travel as often as before, and they might not be able to hop from one city to another city, but they might be able to instead of staying 2 days in Singapore, they might now consider stay 5 days in Singapore, in the sense. So our job at the hotel is to try to work with the local operator, the sightseeing operators and the experience operator, by providing customers coming to our hotels that they can spend more time at a particular city or particular destination, and that they can see the city fully, and they can experience a lot of things that that they might not have time to experience in the past by hopping from one city to the next city, very quickly, in a sense. So our goal, in terms of money, is one, is obviously providing a very safe environment for our guests and our customers by implementing a lot of hygiene and sanitation policy. 2 is by offering them more guest experience and try to encourage them to stay longer at any of our properties, so they can increase their spending at a particular hotel.
That's great. I think an interesting strategy there that is probably going to be one that lots of people in the industry are going to be considering. it's going to be harder to market out to get new people in. So probably extending the amount of nights that your existing people staying there is one way that you can scale out your revenue.
Yeah, no question. So, you will see a lot of operator will be saying that, hey, you stay 3 nights and get 1 night free, that sort of stuff. So I think the encouraging customers stay longer, spend more money with you will probably be the first marketing plan that most people have got in mind.
Fantastic. Now, we're looking at the airline industry, and this is one thing with the actual, the facilities, the properties we're looking at, but people getting to them, and that infrastructure right now is going through profound changes. Airlines are crumbling. Even here in Thailand, we see, Thai Airways is in a very tough state at the moment. Other airlines are collapsing. It's going to have an impact. Yesterday, we were speaking to people who are involved with the airlines, and their question is, how do we get people feeling safe sitting in the middle seat again? Are airlines going to be able to survive this? So the question is, and the cruise industry we've touched on as well. How can, or what do you see this space of airlines and cruises? What's it going to look like in a year from now? Barry.
I think airline capacity and travel on different city pairs are unlikely to return to, shall we say, the 2019 levels before the second half of 2021, and perhaps not until the first quarter of 2022. And this will vary between domestic, regional flights and across the various destinations on the other continents.
Right.
I think the airlines are going to be quite gradual in the introduction of their services, and they're going to want to be comfortable with the viability of the flights and so on. Cruise, I think cruise is the cruise companies are in a good position in terms to offer attractive packages or attractive holidays, shall we say. But there's been so much publicity around Ruby Princess here in Australia and some of the other cruise vessels around the United States and so on, that I think it's going to be a challenge to get the consumer confidence back. But I do think that we're going to see some very keen pricing to have that happen.
Right. And Carolyn, what would you say? How, airlines are going to be changing, and I imagine cruises, they stop through Tahiti as well.
Yeah.
What do you see this in the future, say in the year to come?
I think, with the airlines, obviously, all the new requirements will make it difficult. As you say, I think there's almost that concern of travelers just having to sit, on the aircraft for that many hours. But it needs to be viable. I guess, the key question is around, what will the price of airfares look like as well next year? Will it be similar? Will it be more expensive because of these new measures implemented? So that will also impact, the decision making in terms of choosing or not a destination. But I also think, with the air, there could be new opportunities. I'm just looking through my own filter, obviously here with, the islands of Tahiti. And at the moment, for instance, out of Australia, until COVID, the access was only through New Zealand. So right. You had to fly to Auckland and then on to Papeete. It's going to be harder and harder to do this kind of flights via, again, because each country might have their own measures. So could there be an opportunity to get, a direct flight out of Australia again? That's clearly some of the questions that, the airlines are asking themselves at the moment. And again, looking at these recovery scenarios and which region has got more potential because they're not too far from the islands of Tahiti. So again, the cards might be redistributed, in that sense as well. In terms of the cruise market, You're right, the islands of Tahiti have got a number of cruises, bigger ships that sometimes stop on their way to, Hawaii or the other way around. But what we've got, which might be an interesting path to recovery as well, is a lot of small native cruises. We've got, as Barry mentioned before, some of these expedition ships that seem to be extremely appealing still, like the Aranui, which is like a cargo ship that normally delivers goods to the outer islands, like the Marquesas Island, which is one of the archipelagos. And, it's a very limited number of people on board. So these kind of cruise, same with the Paul Gauguin or the Windstar, seem to be still very appealing. We're getting a lot of inquiries at this stage, people considering it, or people having had to book, the cruise before, clearly, wanting to travel and wanting to know when they can travel again. So extremely eager to actually do that.
Okay. And that's interesting, Carolyn. So are there any airline, like do you see the airlines going in, supposing some of these airlines crumble, or how are the routes going to change getting in there? Like you've mentioned that right now going through New Zealand, are you seeing any of these airline failures, or the airlines not being able to survive this? Is it going to change the routes?
It could, but what we might see as well is maybe, the renationalization of some of the airlines, or some of the governments, truly going behind, their airlines. For the islands of Tahiti, French Polynesia, we've got one national carrier. And again, you need to have this national carrier to fly in and out. There's obviously a lot of other carrier flying, into the islands of Tahiti from the US, from Australia, from New Zealand, there's Air New Zealand as well. But again, yes, the backup of some of the governments behind these airlines is probably going to make a difference, and maybe not as many low-cost airlines. So that could be a big difference in the future.
Right. And it also be seeing your business all over the place down there, Simon. What would you say? What do you see the airlines looking like in a year, and how is that going to affect the industry?
I think I agree with what Barry said. It's a short-term, situation. It's a longer-term situation. It also depending on when we can find this elusive vaccine that we're all hoping for, in a sense. So until we can have a vaccine, I would say that most people, doesn't matter which particular area you're in, hotels, a travel agent, or regional or international tourism, I think the initial 3 to 6 months, it will be very domestically orientated in a sense. So we need to revitalize the drive market that we have forgotten in the past. In a sense, we have to direct our marketing dollars towards the domestic market. I think within Australia, we would hope that all the state borders will be, restriction will be lifted so people can start flying. I think we will hope the situation with the Virgin airline is resolved, in the sense, because I certainly think we do need 2 airlines to be competitive in Australia, and Virgin did provide a lot of support to all the regional cities and so forth. So I think for the initial 6 months, you will see a lot of marketing dollar, a lot of customers will coming domestically within Australia, whether it's the drive market or the domestic airline. And same with our cities around the world. You will see Singapore with focusing on marketing to people, coming over from Malaysia and so forth. Same with Thailand in the sense. Longer term, obviously, if we can find that vaccine, then you will see the international market start to open. But I fully agree with Barry and Carolyn, depending on each government might have different rules and so forth. So it probably won't return, I would say, late 2021, in a sense, when the airline work out exactly the routes, which route is profitable, the capacity, and all this sort of stuff. Hotel like us, we need to adjust our capacity. We have a lot of rooms in the past. We might not be able to open our full inventory. We might have to adjust our inventory and our staffing, in the sense, to deal with the demand, in the sense. So it's a lot of learning to do after this.
Right. So I think the next question we can look at, because carriers, we see carriers changing shape all over. And there's been talk that low cost it's going to be a tough sell. But as a travel agent, and I know this is particularly close to your heart, Barry, what do you see the role of travel agents in the future, as we're coming out of this? Are people going to be booking directly more, or will travel agents have a bigger role in the way things are being booked and advising travelers?
I suspect we're going to be seeing that in many cases, people are going to use travel agents more. Based on the consumer difficulties in communicating, shall we say, with the, if I can use the term, faceless online travel agents and overloaded airline call centres during this COVID-19 period, it's possible that many consumers will look to travel agents in preference to an online travel agent and booking or booking directly with an airline. It's much easier to make contact with the travel agent, go back to your travel agent who booked you in the first place, and get them to, even though you may be on another side of the world, and get them to take steps to get you home, than it has been dealing direct with an airline or dealing via online travel agents. We've had cases where we've brought people home now from Ecuador, Argentina, India, many different places throughout the world. So I suspect there will be, people who've had those experiences will want to use a travel agent. I also suspect that one of the outcomes for this crisis will be that some bricks and mortar of travel agents are likely to transition into home-based mobile consulting. This would reduce their financial outgoings. It would maximise their cash flow while maintaining the sales that they have from their established client base. So it would better position them in the event of a similar situation occurring in the future.
Mm.
With regard to the travel agent, value adding is an opportunity for experienced and skilled travel consultants, whereby they customise the travel experience to individual clients' interests, allowing the travel agent to deliver a more complete travel experience than buying from suppliers. And the larger in the investment by a consumer in their travel experience, the more discerning they are in seeking out advice, guidance. So I suspect that will also be encouraging from a travel agent's perspective. From a travel agent's point of view, those experienced agents are going to be selecting suppliers, whether they're airlines, hotels, cruise companies, etc., who provide or demonstrate that they're providing high standards of hygiene and safety. As Simon said before, this is critical moving forward. And what he's already doing or implemented is more flexibility around cancellations and rebookings. I think that will be critical. And that will apply both to whether it's accommodation or airlines, etc. So they're my sort of initial comments.
Hello, sorry, that just dropped out there. That's fantastic. So I think that what you're saying, and I would tend to agree with you, that travel agents, it's going to be your role more than ever to be up on the information that is affecting the industry. And you're going to basically be the source of knowledge and the gatekeeper, so people will know where they should go, what they can do, what the standards are, and be able to match people to what they're going to be best suited for, rather than the faceless travel agents that they see out there.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I mean, we had situations whereby people have been stranded at airports. They've been in the queue, if you like, and seem to be getting nowhere. And they've got on their phone, they've spoken to their personal travel manager back here in Sydney, and they've taken over the process of rebooking them and so on. As they've been doing that, other people have been aware of what they've been doing. And they've asked if they might talk to our client's personal travel manager to assist them as well. So
Right.
it's when people have these experiences that they really realise the value of the travel agent. I'd also say that we're a very effective means of distributing travel product and travel services, and we enable the suppliers to have a broader reach across all markets. So I think it's critical, though, that they recognise that it's important to be consistent with pricing across all the distribution channels, and if they're going to be a major beneficiary.
Right. And so could I ask you, Carolyn, because you've been in the travel industry a long time, but you're also representing it from the national side for Tahiti.
Yeah.
I guess that travel agents also expanding out to travel advisory boards and travel boards. What are the roles for you? What do you, is there anything more that you would add on to what Barry mentioned?
I think Barry said it's much better than I'm going to do, but I so agree. You know, I think if anything, navigating the world of airlines, of seasonality, of visa was already difficult. Add to that the COVID-19, you know, regulations, rules that is, you know, going to happen obviously in the next few weeks, months, and so on. It's going to make it even more complex. And I think, you know, making the role of travel agents even more relevant. I think we've seen, you know, the last few months, their knowledge, their resilience, you know, in the crisis, helping consumers, you know, because that's the one thing I think that you've got as well through a travel agency, that personal touch, the care factor, which is so important. So yes, they're not going to leave you stranded somewhere, and I think there's that reassurance element as well. And for us, yeah, travel agents, it's really at the heart of our strategy. And I guess, you know, everybody can do the way they want. If you want to build a house, you can decide to try and do it yourself, or you can actually get an expert and use an architect. And so it's really, you know, the same kind of concept, I guess. I would not try to build my house myself. But yeah, so it's really just, I think, keeping that in mind. And we are really focusing on the travel trade here in Australia and New Zealand. They've always been, you know, very important. And I was just saying to Barry before we started, we've kick-started like a webinar series to again keep travel agents engaged, updated on what's happening, and also make sure they can upskill during that time where they do have a little bit more time on their hands. And the response has been really, really, really good. So we launched our first webinar of a series of 4, and we've had 250 agents, you know, registering for the first one, and for the 4, we're close to 700 at the moment. So there is an appetite for it as well, and we're very keen to work and deliver that message and make sure they are ready to sell the islands of Tahiti when the time comes.
Wow, that's fantastic. And then Simon, it'd be interesting to hear from you, because these days we see, you know, with hotels, you've got the traditional OTA versus direct booking, which has been a big theme over the past couple of years. But now travel agents could actually, there's going to be this information, this advisor role that's been discussed by Barry and Carolyn there. How are you going to be rejigging your relationship with travel agents, and do you see a shifting in roles coming up after this?
Yes, at least in the short term, I fully concur with what Barry is saying. You know, I mean, I'm sure we've all been watching a lot of the news clips and so forth, all the bad publicity about cancellation policy, people not getting their money back and so forth. So I would say all the high yield business, you know, people spending a lot of money, business people who's traveling and so forth. I think very few of them in the future will be booking directly with the airline because they're just not sure. You know, sort of, you know, assurances and confirmation, you know, having someone be able to talk to the airline on behalf of you, deal with the hotel cancellation on behalf of you. I would say that will be critical. And you know, we obviously would welcome, you know, the individual personalized service back from the travel agent, which we've been sort of missing a bit, you know, over the last few years, because we do have a lot of these faceless agent that Barry is talking about. But, you know, really, you know, for the high-end business, for the high-yield packages and so forth, I would say the customers will be seeking for assurances. I think they will be thinking about downside and worst case scenario. You know, in the past, we all just go and book a holiday and don't think about cancellation, don't think about what would happen to it. But going forward, I think everybody would have learned and said, no, we need to think about the insurance. We need to think about the cancellation. We need to have a phone number that we can call if something happens. So I do agree with Barry and Caroline. In the short term, at least, I think the travel agent, the personalized service, would come back and play a role to rebuild the industry.
Right. And could I just segue in, given that you're there, Simon, at the moment, and we can pass it on to the other guys after you, but China has a huge role in all of this, in tourism, inbound, outbound tourism. You've got properties all over the place, properties in Singapore and the other countries, as well as into your countries. Where do you see China's position, and how much are you banking on the China market as we come out of this?
I think China will bounce back strongly. I mean, this is based on statistics and facts and not about speculation. And we can see our hotel occupancy in China that built over the last 3 weeks from 0% to 30-something%. And now we have statistics from other competitors who actually claim that the occupancy over 50%. And there were a number of articles, and presumably they are real articles, not fake news. They were talking about the traffic numbers on certain highways in China is actually, much busier than before. So there's proven that there's a lot of pent-up demand domestically already because they can't really travel internationally. And the people couldn't travel for the last 3 months, saving up and so forth. And so I would say that once the international travel restrictions are lifted, you will see it will bounce back. Now, it might take 12 to 18 months, and again, it would depending on that elusive vaccine that we're all talking about. But I would say there is no reason to believe that the outbound tourism of China will reduce in any way, in a sense. I think, in fact, people couldn't travel for a while, and they always have their travel plan. They always want to go to Europe. They always want to come to Australia. They always want to go to Tahiti. It's a matter of delaying it, in a sense, and that will make them more eager to travel, in a sense. So I think it will bounce back.
Thanks, Simon. And it'd be interesting to hear from you, Barry, because as an agent, both inbound, but there's also outbound bookings that you're looking to. And I'm wondering, do you think, is there going to be a shift in that? And as an agent, just hear your perspective on it.
I think outbound tourism to China is going to be slow until there's greater certainty about where and how COVID-19 originated. There's so much media speculation around it. I just think that that's going to be a slow recovery, the outbound. I think what Simon's saying about the inbound to different countries, I'm not so sure about how it will apply to Australia, given the current circumstances. But I think the China outbound market is going to recover much more quickly.
Right. Okay. And Carolyn, you were mentioning in the discussion before this, the China market for Tahiti. How important is that?
Yeah, it's an important market. It's probably in the second tier market. It's also connected to access, so the primary source markets being the US and Europe for the islands of Tahiti. And interestingly, I guess we're just, as I mentioned before, looking at these recovery scenarios and which market could actually provide the tourists that Tahiti needs. So China is obviously part of the equation. Absolutely, I think every destination will probably want to see the tourism dollar coming back, whether it's Chinese, US, European, and so on. I think with China, what's interesting is obviously there are probably a few months ahead of us. So there's some good learnings as well to be taken from what's happening on the ground with the domestic tourism, as Simon mentioned, and obviously just see how we can adapt that learning into an agile decision as well for the destination. So yes, I think obviously we will be considering all markets, it's all again got to be connected to access, and that's what's going to probably be driving the decision in terms of which market we're going to go after in priority.
Great. Now we look at the time here, and it's coming close to the hour in about 10 minutes, and we'll also take some questions, but just very succinctly, I'll put it to all of you, starting with Barry. Is there any message that you would really like to get out to the industry principals? So that's number one. Do you see any incentives coming that you could throw in there, and just any general comments that you would like to put in to wrap up? Barry, let's start with you there.
Well, I'd apply this to our business as much as anyone else, and that is to not take recovery for granted and be prepared to experiment. Don't expect business practices to go back where they were. I think we all need to be innovative, be flexible, and we need to collaborate with our business partners. Where possible, we need to incentivize, I think, both consumers and travel agents. I'd say consumers on the basis of additional value rather than discounting, and travel agents perhaps on the volume that they're able to generate for different products or different suppliers or so on.
Right.
I think we'd need to ensure that safety and hygiene standards are promoted as part of our unique selling propositions. And one I've already covered, I suppose, is the terms and conditions providing greater consumer and trade clarity and more flexibility during the immediate post-COVID recovery period. That would be my wish list.
No, that's good. So you've talked about value, safety, hygiene, and also not expecting the market to come back to those old business practices. Things are going to be different. How about you, Simon? What would you like to say? Any messages to the principals, and some closing comments? And also, what do you see? Do you see any special incentives going to be coming out of this?
Well, I concur what Barry said. I mean, the world will be different, after this, the way we're going to do business, the way that we're going to work from home, we're going to use a mobile office in a sense. But I would say we probably need some clarity from leading health organization, about, practices and standard. We have been getting conflicting, health advice from different countries and so forth, and that is confusing. One people like Qantas come and say, no, we're not going to middle seat, with 1.5 meters, it's not important. Another come and say that is important. I think government and maybe the health organization or global, WHO probably need to take a sort of leading role in that, in setting up a standard globally that would be acceptable, to everybody in a sense. Sure, we need to learn and adapt, but at least to everybody understand that is the minimum health standard that every operator should adopt. So therefore the consumer are clear in a sense, and then expectation is clear in a sense. So that would make us much easier from an operational standpoint, and making us much easier for preparing ourselves to deal with, after COVID-19. Flexibility is key, as I talk about it, and all these sort of rigid policy in the past, and you must cancel 72 hours before, and we're only going to give you 50% refund and all that sort of stuff, I think will be gone. I think we need to do business in a lot more flexible manner. I also agree with Barry that partnership, that people might not want to do business with you in the past because they're so busy. I think, and you'll find a lot of people, potential partner might be willing to talk to you because we're all a bit more hungry for business now. I think, cooperating together collectively, and I think that will probably bring business and rebuild a business much quicker. So I think we need to adapt, be flexible, and learn from this experience so we can have a much more solid foundation going forward.
Right. Thanks for that, Simon. So I think this has been a message that's come through too, to have clarity and people's messages aligned, that's coming out, whether it's for safety, the airlines, making sure that everybody's on the same page. And then finally, Carolyn, what would you like to say to the principles, and then also some closing comments.
Not much left for me to say. I absolutely agree. I think, you know, with Barry and Simon on their comments in regards to the agility, the nimbility we all need to have now, and you know, be able to demonstrate at all level of our tourism industries. I think it's absolutely key. And there's been some really interesting, innovative and innovation coming out of the crisis. And I think it's a good example of, you know, how far we can go. You know, I was just talking about Air Tahiti Nui, the airline of French Polynesia, who actually had to do the longest commercial flight ever, you know, at the back of the crisis, because they normally would fly into Paris via Los Angeles, but because of the travel restrictions, not being able to fly into the US, they actually had to operate it directly. So it was a 15 and, you know, almost 16-hour flight, which they did in the one go with their Dreamliner. So for me, that's such a good example of, you know, something really good coming out of a crisis. And yeah, maybe a new filter in terms of how we do business. It's interesting, the comment in regards to clarity with, you know, the booking conditions, the flexible conditions. And I know, again, at the islands of Tahiti level, there's been a lot of discussion so that all the tourism partners on the ground adopt the same booking conditions, policy cancellations. So that is something that is being currently worked on, and that will make everybody's life easier. That was the feedback from all of our trade partners, saying it's impossible to find our way through this, you know, maze, and we need to understand how it's going to work, and we need to simplify it. And I think it's the same, you know, from a consumer perspective. Simplify the message, go back to, you know, what's relevant, what's going to be important to them in this kind of new context, new normality, new way of operating, traveling, and being inspired.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Yes, it's all going to be very different, but from what it sounds like, though, I think for all of you, there's going to be renewed roles and even more importance on what we do. Even a shift away from this independent one-for-one and going back to where you're actually providing the services that people need. So it's been wonderful and an honor to have you here. We just have maybe 1 or 2 minutes. We have some guests in here. Are there any questions to any, just maybe 1 or 2 questions to anybody here in the meeting? You can ask via Facebook, or you can ask here via the group. We see we've got people, Nick Downing and other people in here. Who has the first question? Who has the second question? Okay, we have a question coming in. Where's the question? Okay, question in on Facebook. I can't see it. Wait, just one moment. Okay, so here's a question. There will be a line between implementing the measures to make people feel safe and not having so many measures that people feel irritated, especially as people's perceptions are changing quickly as there are no cases in certain places or when new cases break out. For example, the person asking this question, he said, I will wear a mask to enter a shop and tolerate a temperature check, even though it's pointless theater in his mind going into the shop. But I don't want to waste my time giving my name and phone number, so I will not enter. And just a bit of a background. So to go into any shop or shopping center, say here in Thailand, you need to take a temperature, you need to log into an app, and sometimes even write your personal details down. And that includes going to the main shopping center and then into restaurants or anything in there. Each shop you have to do the same thing again. In my opinion, this is in the questioner's opinion, this will change week by week, it seems. We talk about the future, yet you forget that it's barely 2 months since things used to be normal. Things change fast. Do you think mentally, I think what they're looking at are people going to get fed up with these things and just want to get things back to normal. Would anyone want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think, you know, that's yeah, it's a fair point. We're already kind of obviously being inundated with all these news, you know, on media every day, having to obviously deal with different rules based on different places you have to go to within your own country. So let's not even talk about when you start traveling, obviously. But I also believe, you know, that's probably something we will have to deal with, and that will indeed evolve probably for the next few months, as I think Simon touched on. You know, if we find a cure and a vaccine, you know, against that, that will be probably a very different story again. So yes, you need to keep a pretty open mindset to that. It's, you know, it's important though, I think, to reassure again travelers, but also local people, to have some sort of measures in place. So yes, I think at the moment we're talking about it, not even knowing when the flights are going to reopen. We just, you know, want to get ready, and that's exactly what we're seeing in terms of keeping a nimble mindset. We need to adapt. We need to adapt to that new normal, but you know, make sure safety is first.
Right, and I think there's a message out there to everybody. I'll just bring it up here, and we have that from Amonleya. And she has asked, hi guys, there was a mention on content and digital. Will this remain a focus and priority as part of your marketing efforts? And how do you plan to improve content marketing strategies in this? And that's put out to anybody who would like to answer. Jump in, anybody, if you'd like to respond to that.
Yeah, massive importance of content, you know, from our perspective again as a destination. We need to be extremely relevant. So it is a big focus of, you know, our overall strategy, and it was before COVID, to be honest. You know, it's all about trying to reach out to the right people at the right time and make sure, you know, we either put, you know, the different kind of interest that they might be you know, interested in, or you know, different verticals that they might have an interest in. So developing content, and I think in an easy and agile ways, is very important. So for social in particular, so that's what we're doing for Tahiti, and taking into account again the fact that we haven't really talked about that, but you know, in terms of what might recover first, there's been a lot of discussion around the luxury markets recovering maybe faster. So that is, you know, the kind of thing we would be working on as well, like whether it's chartering your own yacht, you know, on the islands of Tahiti, and that kind of message that we can put in front of people as well, which we haven't necessarily developed in the past. So we will be looking at that for sure.
I would like to ask you, Simon, because you're looking at hotels too, because there's a huge thing for hotels and properties, even the tourism boards, to be, you know, in digital. The whole thing is pushing your product and getting these direct interactions. Now, if we're talking about travel agents, it's like going back to old school, having these guys being your bastions and these guys that are going to be helping drive your traffic. Do you see that there's any way digitally that you might be like looking at changing the way that you work with these guys and how that would work? Simon?
I think my view is actually we would increase digital marketing. You know, we've all been stuck at home for 3 months and spending a lot more time on a mobile phone, on an iPad, more than ever before, in a sense. So in fact, now a lot of people who didn't use the phone that much more will probably find themselves spending more time on it. So I think we would increase our digital marketing in a sense. The content will probably be different, in a sense, much different than before. I do agree, like your earlier audience talking about that, about the hygiene measure. I think that will be in the background. I think the last thing you want to do is to remind people about, you know, the safety and health and hygiene of it. So I think the content will be slightly different. We try to, you know, tell people the experience and what they're missing out in the things. So in terms of travel agent, I think it's the individual travel agent. I think we need to rekindle that relationship again. I think that is an important part that's been missing in the past. Now, and with digital assistant, I think we probably can have a much faster and more efficient communication method with the individual travel agent going forward in a sense. But certainly, I cannot see that digital marketing will be reduced in the short term.
Can I just say I'd agree entirely with Caroline and Simon there. And I'd say that if there's such a thing as a positive out of all of this, it has been in that it's educating the industry about new opportunities for communication and remote learning, and the benefits in some ways of restructuring our teams and multi-skilling our teams to adjust to the environment we're now working in. And an example of learnings has been the rapid take-up of video conferencing by all the travel industry, both on a business-to-business basis and also on a business-to-consumer area. And I think that's going to be an important part going forward, is this type of environment in travel agency consulting with their customers. So if I can add that.
Thank you, Barry, and thank you to all of you. It's just getting past 7 past the hour there, so I think we'll be able to wrap it up there. But I've learned a lot from all of you too. It's one thing being here in the heart of Asia, but seeing all over the place, whether in Australia, through the Pacific Islands, and then you, Simon, have properties all over the place. Seeing how all of this is working, together, and it's truly a global issue. So I hope that for other people who have been watching, you've got something useful out of this. Stay tuned. These are going to become more regular events that we're doing with eGlobal Travel Media, Australia-based, but coming into also with a new group of sites. So thank you to Stephen for putting this together. And I hope that I'll get to see you all both virtually and maybe in person one day in the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
I'll switch off now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.